welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a female perspective. I'm Jan Amerley, and today I'll be talking about Series 1, Episode 1, The End, with the help of my guest, Veronica Rich, who I will introduce in just one second. But first, I want to briefly talk about the relationship of female fans to Red Dwarf, because you might be wondering why a show which, for the majority of its run, doesn't have any female regulars or indeed any female recurring characters would appeal to us, you know, but as I can personally confirm, since I've been to it several times, attendance at the official Red Dwarf convention, Dimension Jump, is more or less 50% female. Anyway, there are many reasons to like this show, and some are universal. I mean, it's funny, it has relatable characters, but different types of fans watch it in different ways. And I obviously don't claim to speak for all female fans, so I'll be talking to some of the ones I know to get a variety of opinions as we review each episode. So that's my reason for starting this podcast. In later episodes, I will also be covering the appeal of the show to other types of fans who don't necessarily fit the stereotype of a science fiction fan. But for the moment, back to this episode and my guest, Veronica Rich. Hello, Veronica. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jan. Jan Amelie.
Hi, Jan.
I just using Jan because if I use your full name, my Midwest accent just massacres it.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, no, Jan is fine. Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to the listeners and just tell us how you got into the show?
Sure. Well, I go by Veronica, Vero, whatever you like. Just don't call me late to dinner. Mm-hmm. And I got into Red Dwarf probably around 1995-ish. I had been out of college for about a year, and I was working all the time, and pretty much the only time I had for any entertainment was late at night. And there weren't that many channels back then, even the cable.
Yeah, I
do. Exactly. So one night I'm flipping through and I land on PBS, which is not exactly a hotbed of nighttime entertainment in the mid-90s in the St. Louis market. But I happened across this show that I had never heard of, never seen. So I stopped to watch it. It was just starting. And I don't remember exactly what episode it was, but I know it had to be early seasons because I found it funny. It was Red Dwarf, obviously. I found it humorous. And then Cat was in it. And the first character I really liked in this show was the cat. And it took me, it may have even been the first episode where they were explaining, what the cat was. And I just really loved him because Danny John Jules played it so well. He gives the suggestion of femininity without, the cheap trappings that you would use to identify a humanoid cat. Pointed ears, whiskers, a tail, claws, nothing like that. And so I watched it, late at night. They would do reruns. Obviously, these were like playing for the first time, maybe in the US. And these were the episodes that were a few years old. And I watched it for a while, and then I kind of lost track of it. And I came back to it around 2009-ish. A friend got me back into it. And I didn't realize that there were, season 7 and 8 and Back to Earth had just aired. And so I got into it again. And at this point, there was the internet and everybody could get on it. And there were spaces to find. I started out with LiveJournal. And one of the most welcoming places I found to discuss Red Dwarf in general, not just fanfic or relationships, but just in general, was the RD/community. I think that's what it was called on LiveJournal. And that's kind of how I got into that part of it.
Yeah, that was also how I got into that part of it. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been watching the show almost since the start, but it wasn't until when the DVD started coming out that I started, be able to rewatch them at my leisure, so to speak. And
right. And it was so nice to be able to find the DVDs at my local used DVD store. I went looking for them, and I found I did a little hunting, and I found almost all of them within a couple of months. So I was able to catch up and rewatch and
Yeah, and
get
I
into
mean,
it.
and they did them so well, I mean, with all the great extras and the commentaries and everything. I mean, it was just done so well. It would have been good enough if they just, sort of put the episodes out without any extras, because they're good enough by themselves. But I mean,
Yeah,
they did them so well, it just sort of added to the love for the show.
yeah, those cast commentaries are something else.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah, yeah. This is just me telling the listeners. I mean, just in case you hadn't figured it out already, that obviously this isn't going to be a spoiler-free podcast. We are going to assume that you, the listeners, have already seen this episode. I mean, if not, obviously proceed at your own risk. Anyway, we're not going to do sort of a straightforward sort of chronological review of the episode, because I mean there's already plenty of those out there. So I was thinking a better way for me personally to do it would be sort of focus on themes and talking points, that I find interesting about these episodes. I think pretty much indisputably everyone, I mean, who watches the show, I mean, it doesn't make any difference whether they, sort of are into sort of fanfic or not, or if they just casually watch the episodes, everyone pretty much agrees, that the key, the core of the whole show is the relationship between Lister and Rimmer. I mean, I don't think you'd find anyone who disagree with you on that.
I wouldn't disagree. No, I think pretty much everyone gets that I've ever talked to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, although I've sort of said we're not going to go chronologically, I am going to start with the opening scene, because it introduces us to them, and it establishes their relationship so well. I mean, it's pretty much obvious, from the start, from the first 5 minutes, that we've got to sort of Rimmer, sort of a complete stickler for the rules, ridiculously petty, and he's got this just this one person he's bossing about, who really could not care less, who's like, Mr. laid back, Mr. Oh, what's the point of all this anyway, kind of. And it's just sort of a classic sort of odd couple. I mean the Odd Couple was, I think, one of Grant Naylor's influences when they were putting this together, so obviously that would explain it.
Yeah, I think the Odd Couples had an influence across a lot of media genres, but it's definitely something, I feel like it's something Rob and Doug would have grown up with.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they've said they had various influences. I mean, there was also Steptoe and Son, which I confess I've never watched, but I know it's about two men. I mean, in that case, it was a father and son who were sort of trapped together. Hated each other pretty much. But they were trapped in it, and it was about their situation. So I mean, and also another influence of theirs was Porridge, which again this time was about characters in prison. I mean they didn't hate each other this time. It was more sort of a we're trapped together. We're different people. But I mean it was more sort of about them fighting the system, to be honest. So I guess it was more kind of Series 8ish, only a lot. I mean, a lot better than Red Dwarf Series 8. I mean, I have to say,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to get distracted by talking about Red Dwarf Series 8, because we're on Series 1 right now, and if I start going talking about Series 8 too much, I'll start ranting, and that's not a good thing. Well, it will be a good thing if we get to Series 8, but at the moment, back to Series 1. Okay.
Save your rants for back in the red.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, right now, I mean, I'm talking about Series 1, and I love Series 1. Even though I mean I'm not completely uncritical of it, but I mean it's a wonderful series. I mean, obviously it's a foundation on which they built the show, and if it wasn't good, they wouldn't have got more series. So anyway,
I wanted to ask you something. When you started watching Red Dwarf, did you start at the beginning when it started? Like, was the first episode you ever saw the pilot episode?
No, well, the thing is, it's kind of hard for me to say, because back in 1988, I was still at school. I didn't have control of the remote, so to speak. In fact, I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not even sure we even had a remote control back then. I mean, this wasn't 1988. I mean, we might have had one, but it's such a long time ago that I genuinely do not remember. But what actually, yeah, sorry. But what actually happened, as I remember it, is I can't. I mean, I might have been in the room when they might have watched the first series of Red Dwarf, but I genuinely can't remember. But my first memories of Red Dwarf are from about sort of 1990ish, when series 4 was first airing. I got this strong memory of the end of Meltdown. And where Lister goes into his anti-war speech, and my dad, who wasn't really particularly
that's a good one,
but he liked that speech, I mean, because he was a left-wing anti-war kind of person, and it just at that particular moment appealed to him, which is probably why it's why I've got such a strong memory of it. I mean, I should probably say I think the reason we were watching Red Dwarf is because my older sister liked it, and she'd obviously managed to persuade my parents, to please, can we watch it, please? And that was kind of how I remember it. I mean, I also have memories of other sort of series 4 episodes. I think Justice stands out quite a bit. Yeah. Anyway, that's how I first got into it. And then from the 90s, in the 90s, I carried on watching, and by series 7, I think I had my own TV in my room, because I do remember watching Blue when it aired and being like, what just happened? What just happened?
I think that was a lot of people's reactions to watching Blue for the first time.
Because I genuinely, I had no idea it was going to happen until about 2 seconds before, and I thought, hold on, I mean, I've watched TV before. I mean, the body language, it kind of indicates that this is two people who are about to kiss. Are they really going to do it? Oh my God, they did it!
Do you think the foreshadowing of that goes all the way back to the pilot episode?
Yeah. I must admit, when Series 8 came along, I really did not like it, and I kind of rage quit. I think I rage quit after Quality TV. I was like, this is not the show I like anymore. I don't care. I don't want it. But the reason I got back into it was my brother, who's my younger brother. By this time, he was a grown up, and he liked Red Dwarf too, and he started buying the DVDs, obviously starting off with Series 1, and I was like, hey, I just got reminded of why I'd like this show to start with, So I got back into it, and by the time they brought Series 8 out, I managed to, I'd watched, or re-watched several times all the earlier series, and I'd rediscovered my love for the show, So it's a good thing they brought those DVDs out. So we're establishing in the opening scene, that Rimmer, is obsessed with trying to become an officer, and Lister's like, look, you've already failed this exam 13 times, or however many times it is, because they do change the number of times he's failed. You wrote "I am a fish" 400 times, you and fainted. I mean, it's just. I mean, we already know, that. I mean, it's still the opening scene, and they've already established Rimmer's character pretty well. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, and then they have their discussion, and then you think you don't know anything but these two characters, and then comes a third character into the scene.
Of course, yeah. Todd Hunter. Yeah. I mean, Todd Hunter is kind of an interesting character, because he never appears in the show again. I mean, he is mentioned a few more times, but he never appears again. And I think part of that was because Robert Bathurst wasn't available to come back for Series 8. I mean, maybe they might have brought him back if he had been available. But as it is, we have this kind of weird anomaly of this character who never appears in the show again, and yet he's got, I don't know, about 4 or 5 times more dialogue than Kochanski does. I mean, it's kind of bizarre.
It is. One of the things I found interesting, and I don't know if you may have marked it too, is Todd Hunter comes in and he starts talking, and he obviously ranks higher than Rimmer, but he, you
Yeah.
know, he seems to get along with Lister. Lister seems to have some respect for him, where he doesn't have any respect or much respect for Rimmer. And he just kind of has, I feel like he has kind of the easy going, natural, you know, people might follow him or might listen to him that Rimmer would like to have and will never achieve no matter how hard he tries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Todd Hunter just seems, for the rankings, I mean, he's obviously an officer. It's never exactly made clear, exactly how high he ranks. But I mean, I notice in McIntyre's funeral scene that he's at the sort of main table with McIntyre and Hollister. So that kind of implies that he's higher ranking than Kochanski, at least, because she's sitting with the sort of rank and file, so to speak. I mean, we have as when I say we, I mean fan Vickers generally. We've decided that he's a first officer and Hollister's second in command, because it just makes sense with what we see him. I mean, maybe he isn't the first officer, but I mean, for what we see of him in the end, it makes sense for him to be the first officer. So he may as well be.
I think that makes sense, considering, if you go by the series, you don't look at the novels or anything else. If you go by the series alone, the entire crew of this 5-mile ship seems to be about 17 people. So
yeah, I mean, it's I mean, obviously, of course, they I understand, it was a low budget show. They only had so many extras. They only had so many sets. Nobody was throwing money at this. So they couldn't really make it look like a ship with that many people should have looked. But I mean, although
right.
I mean, personally, I don't mind the grey sets at all. I mean, I find them cute and sort of quaint. But yeah,
Oh,
I mean, yeah.
hey, listen, I love the spray painted upside down ice trays that are glued to the wall for control panels too.
Yeah, I just I just like them. I mean, obviously, I mean, I love the later sets too. I mean, but I
Yeah.
mean, for what it is, I mean, and for the budget they were working with, I mean, I think the sets are lovely. I mean. I mean, they do convey, the sort of basic nature of the mining ship we're on. I mean, and these
Right.
people, who are just sort of mostly cheerfully getting on with it, really.
Yeah, I think you mentioned to me your observation about the ranks, and you were telling me what how most of them seem to be very working class, and so they're, you thought their
Yeah.
surroundings kind of reflected that.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only sort of people we see who aren't working class are Todd Hunter and Rimmer, going by accents. I mean, of the people who actually speak. So yeah, I mean, obviously, Hollister is American, so I mean, you know better than I about whether his accent is working class. I mean, I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Sort of. I mean, it's kind of the bland Ohio Valley accent that is kind of endemic to the area I live in. I think I'm probably twangier than him, but he sounds sort of similar to me ish.
So McIntyre's funeral, I mean, it's a kind of charming scene. I mean, Holly says just beforehand, George says he'd like to invite everyone, especially people who weren't able to attend his funeral. And it's just, I mean. I guess you could take that in a passive aggressive way, but I mean, I don't take it that way. I mean, I take it as George, being a friendly person, who wants to invite everyone who can make it.
I know everybody seemed to love George McIntyre. I mean, he seemed to be popular with working class and officers alike. Did you notice that even Rimmer is smiling at one point?
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of doing his kind of Rimmer smile. Yeah, but I mean, yeah,
Well, yeah.
he does smile and applaud, and even Rimmer does seem to at least not to actively dislike McIntyre.
Exactly. I think that's as happy as you see Rimmer get, really, until you get into the late seasons and he accidentally becomes an officer in series 11. So
yeah, oh god, kind of worms there. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, and as I said, I've got to credit a friend of ours, Lord Valerie Mimes, for pointing out, that in this episode, Rimmer is literally the only crew member we see wearing a tie, apart from Captain Hollister, who does wear black more morning tie at George
Mhm.
McIntyre's funeral. Obviously, that's to show respect, but the rest of the time he isn't wearing a tie, and Todd Hunter isn't wearing a tie. Nobody's wearing a tie except Rimmer. It's just such a neat visual way to show that Rimmer is obsessed with authority, and everybody else is kind of, oh, it doesn't matter. Relax, Rimmer.
As much as he, obviously wants to get ahead, and, it's established sort of a little bit here and a little bit later, he, is happy to be a toady, or at least willing to be. One of the things I noticed was I thought it was kind of interesting in the hallway when, Todd Hunter kind of laughs and says, "Oh, Rimmer, that's because you are a Smeg head," and walks
Yeah.
away. I found it kind of interesting that, Rimmer breaks his toadying long enough to yell after Todd Hunter that his career is over. And I
Yeah.
don't know. It made me wonder, the real reason Rimmer can't get ahead, is it that he just can't keep his damn mouth shut long enough? Because we
Yeah,
know that lack of talent, we know from real life that lack of talent is no impediment to getting ahead in some places.
we really do, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I agree, because I mean, we do also see in Balance of Power, in the flashback disco scene, he literally just sort of, Kochanski's dancing with her mates, and Rimmer's trying to get to Lister and his friends, and he just sort of picks up Kochanski's handbag and throws it across the dance floor. I mean, if you want to dance, do it over there. I mean, she's an officer, Rimmer. Did you forget that? I mean, it's just like, he completely forgets, to toady to people if he gets even a little bit annoyed, or frustrated. I mean,
Exactly.
no,
I
I
didn't
mean,
think about that. That's a good way to put it.
I mean, it's not just the fact that he really isn't qualified, and he's picked a subject he's not interested in, and so no wonder he can't pass the exam. It's not just that; it's also the fact that he doesn't play nicely with people at all, and they're not stupid. They're going to notice, that he is actively rude to them. I mean, and there is also the fact, of course, in Stasis Leak. I mean, okay, he's on mushrooms at the time, or he thinks he's on mushrooms at the time, but he does end up actually kicking the captain in the balls. I mean, and you think it was a gazpacho soup that didn't get you, that is the reason you never got promoted. I mean, I think it might have something to do with Stasis Leak instead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Rimmer is his own worst enemy. I mean, which I think we're all supposed to get that, but it's kind of a different layer of, maybe if he just kept his mouth shut more often. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, obviously, there's also the fact that I mean, as they say in the book, he's chosen a subject that he's got absolutely zero interest in, or aptitude for, I mean, and I mean, maybe if, for instance, like Lister does in Balance of Power, he'd taken the chef's exam. I mean, he might have managed to pass that, I mean, because it's just easier, and it would probably interest him more than astrophysics or whatever, So I mean, but no, I mean, obviously, it's partly
Exactly.
because of his family. It's partly because of his family. I mean, they wouldn't be impressed by him being a chef, but I mean, technically, a
Exactly.
chef is an officer. I mean, Peterson is a chef, and apparently, he's also technically an officer. So I mean,
True.
why doesn't
And
why if all he wants is to become an officer, why doesn't he branch out a little bit instead of obsessing on the astro navigation exam?
I don't know.
Yes.
And it's mentioned a couple of times in the episode. They actually reference astronavigation exam, and then they say something about an engineering exam. And I'm thinking, I was just wondering, maybe that's meant to be the same thing. I mean, it's really two different fields, but it's possible that it's meant to be, the same thing. I don't know. I
Yeah,
figured
I'm
maybe
not
it was
sure.
because, he's always trying to please his father, and his father would think something like that is manly, whereas he might think, catering and chefing is not very manly,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I'm sure it would. Yeah, I mean, just remembering. I mean, Rimmer actually says in Balance of Power, a chef, a white-headed ponce, that's not a real officer, But I mean, and Lister just shoots back, well, it outranks you, So I mean, I mean,
I know.
yeah.
Maybe by then it's considered more feminine. I know that I actually have a friend who has been a pastry chef in San Francisco in some big places, and she has talked a lot about how misogynistic the culinary field is, how it's still very male dominated. So
Yeah.
I just, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. So, briefly, this is just a random thing, but since we're on Peterson, why was Peterson in the driving room when the accident happened? I mean, do you think he just brought up Hollister's lunch or something?
I don't know. Maybe he was just running around like a headless chicken in panic and ended up there.
Yeah. It's kind of disturbing to think about. Yeah, but when you put it like that, but yeah.
But yeah, you have a good point. You're probably more right that he was, maybe bringing dinner up or something, or lunch. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess probably the people who worked in the drive room, including the captain, maybe they got sort of special privileges regarding the cuisine. Maybe they got nicer food or whatever. I mean, wouldn't be surprised.
tell me if I'm jumping too far ahead or talking too much, because I don't want to jump in. But I was going to mention that I noticed that the scene after that where Lister goes to the drive room to talk about the cat. I didn't know if you wanted to jump that far ahead or what your next.
The scene where he actually meets Cat, do you mean?
Where Lister is called into the drive room for the
Oh, of
for the
course, yeah.
photograph.
Sorry, and where he meets the captain, yeah. Where
Right.
Captain Hollister calls him
I
about
was
yeah.
I was just going to note the way he, it's said later in a later episode that he didn't have, he didn't have a romantic or a sexual relationship with Kachansky. But then he says, when he goes in and he's like talking to her, he's like leaning over the back of her chair and she's like leaning back into him and they're having this banter. And I'm thinking, okay, even if they've not dated, and I know it kind of gets retconned a lot around, whether they did or they didn't and what level the relationship was at, they had to have some sort of friendship at least to be
Yeah,
that. I mean, I don't
I'm
let
also
people just drape over me and lean back into them if I don't know them pretty well.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, I do know that at this time, when they were writing series one, the idea was that he'd never had the nerve to approach her. They never had a relationship. But I think, I mean, it might be partly the sort of real life kind of friendship stroke flirtation, or at least on part of Craig Charles, because I mean, he recently interviewed her, and it was quite obvious, that I mean, he's been honest about the fact that he fancied her, so and
Right.
and they recently she very recently chatted to him, and she's obviously very comfortable with him, So I mean, it might sort of be their real life relationship bleeding through a little bit. I don't know,
It
but
could be.
I
It
mean,
could be.
yeah, I know you don't like to talk about that kind of thing, so I mean, I'm
I
not going
mean,
to go. I'm not going to go in
we
that.
don't put but we don't put it past guys, to kind of come into personal space like that, but that she would put up with it and,
Exactly. Yeah.
actively
I
be
mean,
okay
yeah. I
with
mean,
it. That's the part.
sort of back to the sort of in-universe characters. You're right. I mean, she does seem quite comfortable with his presence. I mean, and to be honest, I think from the way she sort of says over there where it says captain's office, where it's always the captain's office, that this might even not be the first time that he's sort of use that as not use that directly, that exact excuse, but these sort of asked her some really obvious question as an excuse to talk to her. I mean, and she's not averse to this. I mean, she's probably aware that he's got a crush on her, and she's not sort of averse to flirting a little bit, even if she doesn't necessarily return his feelings. I mean, obviously it's ambiguous, and that's. But I mean, I think
That's a good point.
the implication of the scene is that they're comfortable with each other, and there is kind of the potential that this could have developed into a relationship. I mean, as of course in the novels it does. I mean, I'm not sure.
Good
I think
point.
the point I was trying to make there, which might got a bit lost, was I agree with you, but they do seem quite comfortable with each other, the characters in the universe.
Coming back to your theme, I can't speak for male fans. I don't know if any male fan who's ever watched that has ever contemplated the fact that, they may watch it from Lister's point of view and be like, oh, hey, he's flirting with her and she's flirting back. And I wonder if any of ever stopped to think, well, she probably wouldn't be flirting back if she didn't know him somewhat, at least. And
Yeah.
because, that's not my experience. If I go hit on someone I don't know, they don't usually respond that way.
exactly, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I did want to talk a bit more about the fact that, that we see that the crew we see, about they do seem to be about 50% female. I mean, I did actually check the official site, which helpfully lists all the extras and all the episodes, the uncredited extras and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
from what I could make out, I had to guess with a few names, but from what I could make out, the extras were more or less 50% female, as you'd expect. And then we get to the kind of awkward fact, that Kochansky is the only woman who speaks in this episode, and she only has about 4 or 5 lines. It's kind of
and I'm sort of aware. You're made sort of aware, as the series progresses, that probably the only reason she was given any lines was to play into Lister's narrative later on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, they could have given her a lot of Todd Hunter's lines, I mean, if they wanted to, develop her as a character that we, that we can actually sort of feel her vibe with Lister more, and it would added so much poignancy, if we'd actually seen them sort of talking together more, if we'd seen more chemistry between them, it added so much poignancy to him missing her. But
right.
Whereas what they actually did by giving Todd Hunter a bigger role is they just sort of created a slush ship, basically,
I know. And now that you mentioned, I've never thought about that, but you've got a good point that, you try to imagine all the things that Todd Hunter had. If you take Todd Hunter out and you put her in, imagine, there would have been more interaction. Lister had a good relationship with Todd Hunter. He could have had a good relationship with her and had a crush on her.
Yeah,
and, it would have made a little more sense maybe later on.
Yeah, and also it could have it would have added sort of, it was added something if she had been the one, who was invigilating the exam, which Rimmer spectacularly fails again. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just it would have added something to Rimmer's dislike of her, which is established later. Later, I mean, he mentions in Balance of Power.
Mm-hmm.
How she looked down on me, she called me Rimmer. And Lister's like, everybody called you Rimmer, I mean, I know Rimmer doesn't like Todd Hunter either. That is well established, But I mean, basically, what I'm saying is, when Doug decided to bring back Kochansky as a regular character in series 7, he,
right,
if he'd done a bit more if he and Robert done more groundwork in the end, and even in Stasis Leak and so on, where she reappears, then they wouldn't have had to recast the character, change her personality, and make her completely different.
Right, it's no reflection.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's no reflection on the actress, but she really does seem to just have been brought in to be kind of manic pixie dream girl.
I know, yeah. I mean, basically, I know some people connected with sort of loosely connected with the show have implied that the reason they brought in Chloe Annette was because they didn't think Claire Grogan was a good enough actor to be a regular. And how do I put this? I mean, you may or may not be right there, but it does kind of beg the question. If all you wanted was glorified eye candy, then you can't really complain if you get a glorified eye candy performance, which you could argue she gives in the end, because she has about 4 lines. I mean, if you wanted if you wanted someone who could pull off a more meaty part, then you should have cast you thought could pull off a more meaty part. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if they'd done more groundwork with both the writing and the casting, then series 7 would have probably been better as well, because there would be more of an established character for Kochansky,
right,
instead of completely changing her, and right. Yeah. I mean, I actually like both Kochanskys, and I think they both bring different things, but I guess the point I was making is, I think Claire Grogan gets a bit of an unfair rap, because if they'd given her more to work with, like pretty much anything to work with, then she could probably have made more of an impact,
Right. I mean, when you don't get very many lines, you don't have much of a chance. I mean, there's very, very few actors who can pull off having 45 seconds of speaking screen time to pull it into. And considering we're supposed to believe that, as late as series 10, he's still, mooning over her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of a slightly. I've done that thing where I've ranted a bit, and now, what was the point I was making again? Yeah, the point I was making, was more or less, basically, a flaw with the show. I think pretty much even everyone who likes it would agree is they're not that great at writing for women. I mean, they do improve a lot. I mean, for instance, obviously female Holly, she does establish herself, and she gets. I mean, even though the writing for her wasn't that brilliant, she did make a real impact. And also Chloe and Kochansky it does too. But I mean, I guess the point I'm making is a flaw in the end, with the early shows, is the fact that they're not that great at writing for women, and it kind of has a knock-on effect for further down the line, on what they can do with the show, and it's sort of making the relationship between Lister and Kochansky believable, and poignant. I mean, think how much. I mean, imagine basically if Kochansky had been the one, to escort Lister to stasis, and that's his last memory of her, saying, "Okay, goodbye. Okay, Holly, close the door and start the stasis." It would be more poignant than we've told him to.
Right. No, you make a good point there. And I, from what I remember of reading about the casting of the show, I mean, there's all these, this person could have been cast as Rimmer, this person could have been cast as Lister. Wasn't it that both Rimmer and Lister were going to be cast as white men, and Craig Charles was only cast because he'd been consulted on the script to have Cat cast, and they were they had written him, they were going to cast a black man as Cat. And then Lister read it and said, well, hey, I'm kind of interested in, one of the main characters. Can I have a shot at it? And I don't know if they ever considered a character of color to play either Lister or Rimmer. And so Lister kind of got in on his talent, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember what was Paul Jackson, the producer, asked Craig, do you think the part of the Cat is racist? Because he was, to give him some credit, he was genuinely concerned. He didn't want to, yeah. But anyway, and then Craig said, no, it's fine. Can I audition for this? Oh, right, yeah, okay, sure. And then basically, I think Robin Doug said, they were a little bit worried about the fact that Craig had never acted before, but that he was so charming, I mean, that is the actual word they used, that they thought, well, actually, yes, this could work, I mean, even though they were considering sort of making Lister a middle-aged character, and they had actually written him in the end as such, they thought, well, actually, he's got charm, I mean, you care about him, you relate to him, I mean, so why the hell shouldn't we cast him? And that's what happened. I think that's what happened.
I was just wondering, talking about, well, they don't seem to write for women much. I'm thinking, well, they weren't writing for non-white men much either, but what they wrote worked because people are just people. And so, try to imagine if either Lister or Rimmer had been a female character, if an actress had come in and been like, hey, we think that person nailed it. Let's go ahead and cast them as one of these two.
Yeah, well, if that had happened, then we know that a lot more people will be clamoring for them to get together than currently are. Oh right, yeah. Oh, sorry. One thing, Vero. This episode. What score out of 10 do you think you would give it for slashiness, basically?
Ooh, I don't think it's just kind of an introduction. It has a lot more characters in it. You don't see a lot going on between Lister and Rimmer that is, you know, anything more than I think more roommatey or maybe matey, friend, you know, frenemies, I think is maybe the best term.
Yeah,
My,
it's
you know,
yeah.
if on a slashiness score, I'd think pretty low. I mean, I feel like maybe a 2, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to give it maybe say 5 out of 10, but that isn't so much for Lister and Rimmer. It's more for the relationship between Lister and Todhunter, which just kind of gives
Yeah.
it just kind of
Okay,
gives you those vibes, you know.
I might throw that to a 3 or 4. Yeah, that part
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously most of the time we're only thinking about Lister and Rimmer, but in this just this one episode, you know, Todhunter's presence does kind of bump it up a bit. Right, okay, so yeah, I'll give it 5 out of 10 for slashiness. Right, okay. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Hologramet for the technical help, and also to Veronica Rich for guesting. Although I'll be talking to you again in a minute, but thanks for your comments. Uh-huh.
No problem. Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
So I hope you listeners enjoyed listening. If you'd like to give us feedback, you can do so on either Tumblr or Discord, where I'll be making posts linking to this episode. And the next episode we'll be covering, you won't be surprised to hear, will obviously be Future Echoes. I hope you'll join us then, but for now, goodbye.